There's a moment in every person's life when they look into the mirror and suddenly realize that the face staring back at them isn't quite the version of themselves they imagined they would become. It's not always failure that haunts them sometimes, it's something quieter, like a subtle emptiness deep inside, a feeling that something essential has quietly slipped out of place. A strange gap appears between who they are and who they know, deep down, they could become. That moment, that uncomfortable mix of clarity and unease, is where true self-transformation is born. Because before anything ever changes on the outside, a silent psychological revolution begins on the inside. We like to believe that change is an event, a choice, a breakthrough, a dramatic turning point. But in reality, transformation is the slow dismantling and rebuilding of the mind. It's not just about acting differently, it's about seeing the world through an entirely new lens. Music, and that kind of change, the deep, internal kind, never arrives overnight. It unfolds quietly, through struggle, hesitation, self-doubt, and those heavy moments of introspection most people run from. Psychologists have studied this for over a century. Carl Jung called it individuation, the process of gathering the fragmented pieces of the self and merging them into a unified whole. Abraham Maslow described it as the path of self-actualization, the gradual blooming of a person's full potential once their basic needs are no longer standing in the way. But beneath all the theories, the truth is brutally simple. Transformation begins the moment the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the fear of changing. Most people never reach this consciously. They drift through life repeating emotional patterns, replaying the same silent programs written in childhood. Their decisions are shaped by invisible scripts, beliefs passed down by family, culture, and early experiences. These hidden beliefs become psychological walls that quietly restrict what they believe is possible. I'm not good enough. People like me never succeed. It's too late to start again. They sound harmless, but they become the invisible architecture of a person's entire life. The psychology of transformation begins the moment you start to question those walls. Not demolish them, just notice them. Awareness, simple as it sounds, is the first act of rebellion against a conditioned mind. Because once you see a pattern, you can no longer be fully controlled by it. Researchers studying neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reshape itself, have discovered something remarkable. Every time you challenge an old belief, your brain literally begins to rewire. New neural pathways form, old ones weaken. The brain is not a fixed map. It is a living, breathing landscape shaped by your experiences, your decisions, and the stories you choose to tell yourself. So, in scientific terms, transformation is neurobiological construction. You are physically reshaping your mind when you choose differently, think differently, and act differently. But here's the paradox. Most people want transformation without discomfort. They want the reward of change without the friction that makes change possible. Yet discomfort is not a sign of failure, it's the sign that your brain is being pushed out of its predictable pathways. It's the old self losing control. The ego resists because its entire job is to preserve stability. That's why growth feels chaotic. Your internal system is desperately clinging to what feels familiar, even when the familiar is the very thing suffocating you. If you've ever tried to change a habit, waking up early, eating clean, thinking differently, you've felt this resistance. But it's not laziness. It's your brain defending its identity. Cognitive scientists call this homeostasis, the psychological mechanism that keeps your sense of self consistent. When you act in ways that don't match your internal identity, your mind feels discomfort and tries to restore the old balance. That's why real transformation doesn't start with habits. It starts with identity. The internal image must shift before the behavior can sustain itself. Think about it. If you see yourself as someone who is always messy, you can clean your room once or twice, but the chaos will return. If you believe you're bad with money, you can save for a week, but the old patterns will drag you back. But when you tell yourself, I'm becoming the kind of person who takes care of my environment, or I'm learning to manage money, the identity begins to shift. And once the identity shifts, the behavior becomes natural, not forced. Transformation, then, is an identity project disguised as self-improvement. Every meaningful change, breaking addictions, healing relationships, rebuilding confidence begins with redefining who you believe. yourself to be. That's why journaling, therapy, and deep introspection work. They take what's unconscious and drag it into the light. And once something hidden is seen, its power fades. But the process is never linear. People describe transformation not as a straight line, but as a cycle. Progress, doubt, regression, clarity, renewal. It mirrors Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. You must leave the comfort of the familiar, face inner trials, and return transformed. Psychology confirms this too. Transformation includes what is called a liminal phase, the space between who you were and who you're becoming. It's uncertain, uncomfortable, and absolutely essential. Without it, there is no room for rebirth. Even the brain reflects this cycle. During the liminal phase, quitting a job, ending a relationship, facing old trauma, the brain's default mode network becomes more active. That's the region responsible for self-reflection and personal narrative. It is the brain rewriting your story. And every new story you tell yourself, when repeated with emotion, begins to solidify neurologically as your new internal truth. So when people say, you become what you believe, they're not speaking poetically. They're describing a measurable psychological process. Belief is not just a thought, it's a pattern of neural firing repeated until it feels real. The only way to change it is through conscious repetition, emotional reinforcement, and new experiences that prove to your brain that the old pattern no longer defines reality. But here's the catch, and it's exactly where most transformation journeys collapse. People often try to transform through sheer willpower, forcing new habits, new routines, new behaviors, all while clinging tightly to old identities. They say, I want to be confident, but deep inside, they still see themselves as insecure. They try to act strong, while silently believing they are weak. Subconscious doesn't fall for the performance. It knows the old script too well. This is why transformation demands truth before it demands effort. You can't become someone new while lying to yourself about who you are right now. Radical honesty is the foundation of real change. Not the type of honesty that shames or criticizes, but the kind that reveals the true landscape of your internal world. Here's what I feel. Here's what I've avoided. Here's what still hurts. This kind of honesty breaks through the psychological armor that keeps you trapped in the same emotional cycles. It's like cleaning a wound, painful at first, but essential for healing. And when you reach that depth of honesty, something shifts inside you. You stop trying to change from a place of self-rejection, and you begin evolving from a place of self-understanding. That difference is everything. Most self-help advice fails because it assumes you need to fix yourself. But psychological transformation has nothing to do with fixing. It's about integration. It's about reclaiming and integrating the parts of you that you've denied, buried, or labeled as bad, and learning to work with them instead of against them. Take procrastination, for example. On the surface, it looks like a discipline issue, but beneath it, there is almost always fear of failure, fear of success, fear of criticism or judgment. When that fear is acknowledged with compassion instead of shame, the behavior begins to dissolve, because the mind no longer needs avoidance as a form of protection. In that sense, transformation is not self-attack, it is self-reconciliation. That's also why emotional awareness is a cornerstone of true change. You cannot transform what you refuse to feel. Emotions are not problems, they are signals, messages from the subconscious telling you what's misaligned or unhealed. Anger may signal violated boundaries. Sadness may reveal unmet needs or loss. Anxiety may point to the tension between who you were and who you're becoming. When you learn to interpret emotions instead of suppressing them, you begin to move through them rather than being trapped inside them. Modern psychology confirms this. Studies show that mindfulness and self-compassion accelerate transformation by lowering the brain's threat response. When you approach discomfort with curiosity rather than judgment, the amygdala, the fear center, begins to calm. And this opens the doorway to the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for executive decision-making, planning, and long-term growth. In simpler terms, kindness towards yourself literally expands your capacity to change. The most profound transformations don't announce themselves with dramatic breakthroughs. They happen quietly, subtly, in the tiny moments when you catch yourself choosing differently. You pause before reacting. You breathe before speaking. You say no when you used to say yes out of fear. Each of these moments is a psychological micro-revolution, reshaping the architecture of the self. And when enough of these moments accumulate, the old identity loses its grip, replaced by something clearer, freer, and more aligned with who you're becoming. Yet we rarely notice transformation in real time. It becomes visible only in hindsight, in the conversations you no longer engage in, the thoughts that no longer dominate you, the pain that no longer defines you. These are the milestones of change. The person you are right now would be unrecognizable to your past self. And that's the quiet miracle of self-transformation. It's not a single awakening, but the gradual realization that you have outgrown an older version of yourself without needing to destroy it. And still, the journey continues. Transformation doesn't end, it evolves. Every time you expand into a new identity, life presents another threshold, another layer waiting to be integrated. Growth never demands perfection, only participation. The mind resists, the heart hesitates, but something deeper keeps pulling you forward, a subtle, undeniable instinct toward becoming. What most people misunderstand is that transformation isn't built on motivation or discipline alone. It's built on awareness, an awareness so honest that it dissolves illusion. Because when you see your mind clearly, the fears, the narratives, the protective patterns, you gain freedom. Not freedom from difficulty, but freedom to choose differently even when difficulty remains. There is a psychological phenomenon called cognitive dissonance, the discomfort that arises when your behavior and beliefs no longer match. Most people escape that discomfort by shrinking their actions back to fit their old beliefs. But the people who truly transform do the opposite. They hold the discomfort long enough for their beliefs to evolve. They walk through that in-between zone where nothing feels certain. You're too aware to go back, but not yet confident enough to move forward. That's where the real work happens. That's where transformation crystallizes into identity. In that sense, self-transformation is not a single event. It is a continuous negotiation between who you were and who you're becoming. Each day brings a subtle invitation to think differently, respond differently, perceive differently. Some days you'll fail, some days you'll fall back. But even then, you're not starting from zero. Awareness does not disappear. Once you've seen truth, it lingers in the background of every decision until you listen again. One of the most overlooked pieces of transformation is environment. We like to pretend willpower can overpower everything, but your surroundings, the people you speak to, the places you exist in, the content you consume, all reinforce your identity. Psychologically, your environment mirrors your self-image. If you're trying to become more creative, but you live inside cynicism, your brain receives conflicting signals. Your external world constantly drags you back toward the identity you're trying to outgrow. This is why psychologists emphasize environmental design. If you want to transform, you must build a world that supports the version of you you're becoming. Remove the triggers of the old self, add cues for the new one. Surround yourself with people who see your potential, not just your past. Every sensory input, every conversation, sound and physical space shapes your neural wiring, whether you realize it or not. You cannot plant new seeds in toxic soil and expect them to grow. But the deeper layer of transformation has nothing to do with the external world at all. Transformation begins with what you allow yourself to believe on the inside. Because beliefs aren't just thoughts, you repeat their instructions your brain sends to your entire system. When you believe you're incapable, your nervous system prepares for failure before you even take the first step. But when you believe change is possible, your physiology adjusts in real time. Your breath, posture, focus, and emotional energy begin to organize around that inner signal. It's not magic, it's biology. The brain responds to what it believes is true. This is why visualization and affirmations work when they're supported by emotion. Neuroscience shows that imagining an action activates nearly the same neural pathways as performing it. The more vividly you rehearse a new identity, the more familiar it becomes to your brain, and the less resistance you feel when you express it in the real world. You become, quite literally, what you practice being. But transformation isn't about pretending. It's about embodying. Pretending says, I'm acting like someone I'm not. Embodying says, I'm learning to live as the person I already am beneath all the noise. Deep down, the human psyche doesn't crave to become someone new. It wants to return to the version of itself that was always whole, but became buried under fear, expectation, and conditioning. That's the paradox. Transformation feels like becoming different, but in reality, it's remembering who you were before the world trained you to forget. Philosophers describe this through the idea of the false self, the mask we build to survive. As children, we adapt. We learn what brings approval, what avoids rejection, what keeps us safe. We construct a persona that fits the environment, but eventually, that persona becomes a cage. It limits expression, truth, and freedom. Transformation begins the moment you stop confusing that mask with your identity. The moment you ask, who am I underneath everything I was taught to be? That single question can unravel decades of conditioning. In therapy, this is sometimes called ego death, not dramatic annihilation, but a soft unhooking from the constructed self. You stop needing to defend everything. You stop chasing validation. You stop trying to prove your worth. You begin observing your thoughts instead of becoming them. From there, transformation becomes less about effort and more about unfolding. The more you release the false layers, the more room you create for your authentic self to rise. And authenticity isn't static, it moves with you. Who you are today is not who you were 5 years ago, and that's not inconsistency, that's evolution. The psychology of transformation recognizes that identity is fluid. Every experience, every belief, every emotional breakthrough edits your internal narrative. So instead of hunting for a final version of yourself, real transformation invites you to live in alignment with your current truth, knowing that truth will continue to evolve. But this journey demands courage. Not dramatic courage, but quiet courage, the kind that shows up when no one's watching. Because changing yourself means leaving behind old versions of you and sometimes disappointing people who love those old versions. You'll face misunderstanding, loss, and moments of deep confusion. That's not weakness, it's evidence that the old emotional structure is dissolving. There's a psychological principle often overlooked: emotional conservation. Suppressed emotions don't disappear, they transform into patterns, projections, and even physical tension. When you finally choose to transform, all those stored emotions rise to the surface. That's why it feels chaotic. You're not breaking, you're releasing years of emotional backlog. Every release creates space for renewal. As this happens, your relationship with time shifts. The future stops being something distant you chase and starts becoming something that unfolds naturally from the choices you make now. You stop trying to become someone and begin being someone. Your actions align with intention instead of desperation. Ironically, that's when transformation accelerates. The moment you stop chasing it is the moment you embody it. Transformation isn't always loud or visible. Sometimes it looks like silence, stillness, withdrawal. You may spend months reflecting, journaling, observing. To others, it looks like stagnation. But internally, your neural pathways are rewiring and subconscious beliefs are being rewritten. Deep transformation often happens quietly, in the background of ordinary life. And when the new self stabilizes, it doesn't feel foreign, it feels like home. Your internal conflict softens, old triggers lose their power. You respond calmly, speak honestly without rehearsing, and carry a groundedness that doesn't depend on outcomes. This is psychological maturity, not the absence of pain, but the presence of perspective. Neurologically, this stage reflects greater coherence between the emotional and rational centers of the brain. Emotion and logic integrate. Instinct and awareness cooperate. Reactions become choices. Impulses become insights. You stop living on autopilot and start living with intention. This is self-regulation. This is inner alignment. But even then, the process continues. The self is not a destination, it's an ever-adapting system. Transformation is a spiral. You revisit the same lessons at higher levels of awareness. Each return brings more understanding, more patience, less fear. Viktor Frankl said it clearly: when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. This is the essence of transformation. External control is limited, but internal evolution is limitless. Life may not always allow you to choose what happens, but it always allows you to choose what it means. That shift in meaning gives pain its purpose. So if you find yourself in the in-between, not who you were, not yet who you're becoming, remember that confusion is not failure. It's the dissolving of the old identity. It means something new is being born. You don't need all the answers. You just need to stay awake through the transition. Awareness is the bridge between what was and what will be. Eventually, transformation stops being something you work for and becomes the way you live. You no longer need extreme change because your life becomes a constant state of renewal. You grow without forcing, learn without pressure, heal without rushing. And in that quiet unfolding, you realize transformation was never about becoming extraordinary. It was about realizing how extraordinary it is to be fully conscious. The psychology of self-transformation isn't about perfection. It's about awareness, compassion, and truth. It's about aligning your inner world so deeply that your outer world begins to shift in response. It's about walking into the unknown without needing guarantees. Life itself is a series of transformations from innocence to experience, from fear to understanding, from self-protection to self-expression. And if you look carefully, every ending you've survived wasn't an ending, it was an initiation. Every heartbreak, every failure, every moment of despair was shaping you into someone capable of deeper presence and deeper strength. The person you're becoming isn't a product of luck or motivation. It's the result of every moment you chose to face yourself honestly instead of hiding. Transformation is not a single breakthrough, it's a lifelong dialogue between who you've been and who you're becoming. It may not be glamorous, it may not be easy, but it is real. And in the end, that's what matters. To live a life true enough, aware enough, awake enough to say, I didn't just exist, I evolved.